So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles.
In January, a few days before the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission approved 11 spot Bitcoin exchange-traded funds, billionaire investor Chamath Palihapitiya shared a very bullish outlook for Bitcoin in 2024, predicting how much of an impact the new products would have on the leading cryptocurrency by market cap. In the year's first episode of the popular All In podcast, the billionaire made 4 important predictions about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ETFs. First, he predicted that 2024 would be the most important year for Bitcoin since it was launched in 2009. Chamath explained that the ETFs would significantly increase allocation from institutional investors, something Bitcoin investors had been anticipating for years. Chamath's second prediction was that Bitcoin would cross the chasm and become a mainstream asset, again due to increasing demand through the ETFs. The billionaire also predicted a time when Bitcoin would be so widely known and accepted that even the boomers who have been strongly opposed to it would be able to easily buy and hold the crypto asset. Chamath's final prediction was that Bitcoin would become a part of the traditional financial lexicon by the end of 2024. The ETFs have been approved, and they've broken records that even Chamath must not have envisioned when he made those predictions. According to recent reports, US spot Bitcoin ETFs now hold over 855,000 Bitcoin, while global ETFs hold over 1 million. At current prices, that is over $67 billion. In the latest episode of the All In podcast, Chamath highlights the importance of the ETFs and the halving event, predicting a huge bull run ahead for Bitcoin in the coming months. The billionaire points out that in previous cycles, Bitcoin's price remained in the same range within 3 to 6 months after the halving events. However, after the 6th month, things get really heated up and prices skyrocket. He is predicting a similar order of events in 2024 and 2025, both in terms of prices and increased adoption. As we bring you clips from the video, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
I thought it would be good to talk about crypto for a couple of reasons. One is because we just had the halving at the end of April.
Did that happen?
The halving is where, just for folks that don't know, the way that Bitcoins are created is by solving these complex mathematical algorithms that take a lot of time and energy and money. And when you solve it, you get rewarded with some number of Bitcoin. And roughly every 4 years, that reward gets cut in half. It's called a halving. This week, I saw somebody who reminded me all of this, and I just want to give this guy a proper shout out. So his name is Wences Casares, and Wences in Silicon Valley, I would say, really was agent zero of Bitcoin. He was the one in 2010 that introduced it to me. I remember he reminded me of the story, actually. We were at Oren's Hummus, and he's like, he's Argentinian. He's a great, so I'm going to try to copy. He's like, Chamath, you need to buy the Bitcoin. So I heard the story. I fell in love with it. I remember I called my family office. I'm like, buy me 1 million of these things. And he was like, or $1 million worth. And he was like, are you crazy? And I was like, no, this is just a little appetizer. We'll get to the main course. Anyways, he has done a phenomenal job of understanding and proselytizing Bitcoin. And I want to thank him because he really put me onto this. But he mentioned something to me when I saw him a couple of days ago, which is you should really look at the pattern of Bitcoin after a halving. And so I was really curious. And so I had a guy on my team, Quentin, put this together. So Nick, let's go to the first page. So why is this interesting? So here's a little Bitcoin price analysis for you guys. So there's been a couple of halving cycles that have happened. And I asked him to go back and look at the price performance 1 month after a halving, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, and 18 months after a halving. And what you notice is that there are these moments initially, where essentially when you go through a Bitcoin halving, people are sort of reassessing what's happening and they're trying to figure it out. That's sort of what I would say happens in the first month and roughly what also happens in the first 3 months. But then within 6 months to a year and 18 months of these things, there are these crazy price appreciation cycles that happen. So that's what this page shows, which is, 18 months after the first halving, the Bitcoin price returned 45x. After the second halving, it returned almost 28x. And after this third halving, it returned almost an 8x, which is really incredible returns in such a short period of time. If you go to the next page. And so if you graph that, this is what it starts to show, which is what is this price performance after each of these halving cycles. Now, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because on top of this halving, which theoretically, if history is a guide, we should see some price appreciation. Obviously, the other thing that's happened is we've commercialized Bitcoin. And we talked about this sort of as my big prediction for 2024, which is these ETFs are really going to allow Bitcoin to cross the chasm and have its sort of central key moment, right? And so if you apply the averages, and again, these are just averages, they're by no means predictions. Okay, so I just want to qualify that.
Yeah,
these are
this
just
is not financial advice.
It's not financial advice. These are just guesses. Data. We took these and we applied it to the price of Bitcoin. And if you go to the next page, you start to see what could happen if you just take the average of the last few cycles. So because the first cycle was so extreme, and you start to
so you're just doing cycle 2 and 3 here, to be clear.
Just the averages of cycle 2 and 3. And what you start to see is some really meaningful appreciation.
The summation of Chamath's analysis is that Bitcoin could reach more than $500,000 per coin by October 2025, which marks exactly 18 months post-halving. According to his chart, $497,499 is the target implied by the last halving cycle. However, the chart shows that prices could run even higher, with Bitcoin hitting a staggering $1.14 million if the average of cycles 2 and 3 is applied. The chart shows that Bitcoin did 45.52x 18 months after the first halving, 27.92x after the second, and 7.80x 18 months after the third halving. Even if this cycle is stunted like the 2021 cycle, experts like Chamath still expect Bitcoin prices to run much higher before the cycle ends in 2025. In addition to price movements, Chamath is also excited about increased Bitcoin adoption, especially among institutions, and how it would impact Bitcoin prices. Here are more clips from the video.
When I talked to Wences about this, how he explained it, which makes a lot of sense to me, is there are a lot of countries that will never look at Bitcoin credibly, even if they support it. The US may be one of those. But there's an increasing body of countries that will become dual currency. And they will look at their local currency, and then they will look at Bitcoin. And they will say both of these two things are needed. One, when you're transacting on a daily basis for random goods and services. And two, when you need to buy a permanent asset that needs to have residual value, you'll use something like BTC. And I think that's a very powerful concept. And if you look at what this price chart could indicate, is that if this thing starts to get to these levels of appreciation, it is going to completely replace gold and start to become something that has transactional utility for hard assets. And I think if you marry that with this worry that some folks have about dollar debasement, you start to see some really interesting opportunities. So I just thought that this was a interesting thing that he here's our disclaimer, interesting thing that he put me on. I thought I'd share that with you. I'll publish this on Twitter, but that's your crypto corner for the year, folks.
I think it's really interesting how the crypto community is getting organized into basically a lobby to advocate for its interests, because
it's the biggest lobby in America. Did you know that?
Yeah, they've been so targeted over the last few years because Gensler and Warren have been on a crusade to basically make crypto illegal or drive it offshore. Well, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And now the crypto people have basically had a political awakening and realized they have to get involved in the political system just as a matter of defense, self-defense.
Back to the young people we talked about in the previous story, I think the reason they're attracted to crypto is because it doesn't have government control. And since if you don't trust the government and you see the government over and over and over again cover things up or the grift or make decisions that are not in your generation's best interest, why wouldn't you opt out of their financial system? And you know what? There's a lot of them, and they're getting organized. To your point, Sachs, I think we're going to have a crypto framework, and it's worth probably 5 points in this election. What do you think, Sachs? How many points is being the pro-crypto candidate worth in this election? 1, 2, 3 points of votes? 4 points? It's got to be some significant.
It's hard to
if young people
quantify,
show up,
but-
it could be 500 basis points. I mean, young people do not show up to vote because there isn't an issue that they care about.
Correct.
But there's 50 million Americans that own crypto. 50.
Okay, so if 10% of them are, like, let's say that's their single issue, that's 5 million votes.
No. There's a plausible case where 40 million of those folks show up because you're talking about a structural part of their wealth creation, right? So, for example, like, President Biden talked about giving people a head start by eliminating their debt. That's a narrow issue. And the reason it's a narrow issue, there's just as many people that don't have debt and just as many people that paid off their debt. And it creates a lot of haves and have-nots. And there's all these rules around who will get the debt relief, et cetera. You end up touching 4 or 5 million people maximum. But if there are 50 million people who have now decided to have at least a hedge against the establishment and the traditional financial system, and you are threatening to take that wealth away, I could see how 80% of those folks show up to the ballot box and say, all right, which one of you will just leave me alone? And if the answer is President Trump, then they're all going to vote for President Trump.
In other news, Cathie Wood's ARK Invest has dropped out from the spot Ether ETF race. In the updated S1 filings shared by Bloomberg ETF analysts on Twitter, ARK's partner, 21 Shares, is the only name listed as the prospective issuer of the 21 Shares Core Ethereum ETF. In a statement explaining the surprising development, ARK said, ARK remains proud to be a part of the select group of Bitcoin ETF filings approved by the SEC in January. We remain fully committed to the ARK 21 Shares Bitcoin ETF, as we believe Bitcoin is a public good that everyone should be able to access at a low cost. As for Ethereum, ARK believes in its transformative potential and the long-term value of the Ethereum blockchain. But at this time, ARK will not be moving forward with an Ethereum ETF. We will continue evaluating efficient ways to provide our investors with exposure to this innovative technology in a way that unlocks its full benefits. What do you think is the reason behind this sudden development? Please share your replies, as well as comments on Chamath's analysis and Bitcoin price prediction in the comments section below. Also, ensure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.